Well, as well?
Yes.
Oh, great. Yeah. We're water drinkers.
Yeah. So do we.
So everybody can be seen.
You are inconvenient.
Do they have bills today for, the back 40 project?
I think that this bill is gonna affect us.
Which one, do you know?
839, 840, and was it 881 is the new one?
Yeah, 881.
I don't know 881, I think that's Highland copper. The 839 and 840 are, bills that Eagle Mine is proposing.
Yeah. But it's gonna affect us because the, back 40, at the time that they submitted their wetlands permit, changed the entire structure of their facility completely. So they've already been permitted for the first 3 permits on a specific facility layout. Now their layout is completely changed. So I think that by passing this bill, it's gonna hurt us as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because it doesn't it doesn't specify that any money would be exempt from the law, right, or that it only pertains to Eagle.
The part 301 only, at this time, would only pertain to Eagle Mine. It doesn't pertain to.
What's
back
301?
40. So 301 is inland lakes and streams. But we're talking about tailings facilities. Tailings facilities that use old open pit mines for their tailings, to deposit tailings. And I don't think the back 40 project has that.
But 839 is.
The part 632?
No, I said 839. 839
I'm
from
not
my
familiar with 839 either.
I thought that's what was going to be brought up today.
Yeah. 1 second.
Oh my gosh.
I agree.
You said your name was Regina? Is that right?
What did you say your name is?
Megan? Yeah. Was that right? Regina?
Yeah.
Okay. And I didn't catch
Megan?
yours.
Tony?
Tony? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Megan.
What's your name?
Gracey.
Gracey.
And what is your position with Eagle?
I am the social responsibility advisor. To do all of our community partnerships and donations.
Over here. Okay, so he's muted on that. You're actually going to that, Jasmine? Yeah, go around.
What's going on? What is going on? What is going on?
We're just watching and get everything.
Are you able to communicate with the far side? Hello, this is NMU. Can you hear us? This is NMU. Can you hear us? Anyone? Can you turn the mic on?
Okay, sounds good. Bye.
Nothing yet.
Hello. Hi.
Sorry about that. You have the mic. Can you hear us now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay.
Let's do better.
All is well. Thank you. Just doing a quick.
Oh, you can't see me. Can you adjust my color a little
Right, of
bit?
course.
Because
That's good. So where
they tend to turn.
Okay, I think we're starting.
12:30.
They need to be the color that's the.
If we do start,
it's not
we'll
the
grab
studio.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course. Good. Are you coming in?
Yes, but I got some work to do.
I can only choose one person today. It's not your time.
I'm gonna go.
Hey, Matt.
Got a few
Hey,
minutes.
I got that stuff from you about 1, 2, 3 on this. What's the scoop on that? Where's the, starting point, where's the end?
It's muted. Mine's, oh, there it is. Okay, good.
put it on mute for a minute. I haven't actually started yet.
Especially over here. Oh, he's got it. I was talking to Rebekah, I was like, yeah, his, a really good candidate, because last night, I locked my ID in the office. I can't find this. My original.
They probably put them
But I've got like a house in the you just put chicken in the so I can just. Yeah, I know, but. Okay, and I'm probably one of them, but.
That's in Lansing. Try that. Yeah, I mean, it's in a totally different direction, but we could have visited from the inside.
It's a good question. What's going on? Hey Regina, you have Wi-Fi here? You do? Perfect.
Yeah, and you have to sign in and accept their terms and.
So Megan, many people weren't expected to show up, hey?
We had just heard that there was one other person, Kathleen Heidemann.
Okay.
But we didn't really know
Okay.
what to expect.
Same here.
Yeah.
I was, like I said, I was expecting a much larger room than this.
Yeah, so was I. Yeah.
I was expecting it to look like one of the state board meetings.
Yeah. I've not been to those. What are those like? Boring.
That's why.
You sound like my daughter.
I wish my grandma was home so she would babysit me. She's in Florida because she hates the snow.
Ugh.
She loves it, but she doesn't like the cold. She wishes it would be warm.
Yeah, she doesn't want to deal with it.
She's like, I'm leaving as soon as it goes. And also the weather forecast once said in the middle of spring it was going to go snow.
That happens sometimes here. How old are you?
6.
6? 6 in November. Is it pretty cool being 6? Do you like being 6?
Yeah, well, this year I'm on June 7th.
Yeah. What do you think you'll like better, 6 or 7? 10.
Good answer. But you don't want to grow up too fast, Gracey. Enjoy your childhood.
Right?
I grew up too fast. Now I'm regretting it. I can't go back in time anymore.
But I understand if you go back into the future, when the back to the future version.
That would be pretty cool.
Your childhood was a great childhood too?
Did I have a great childhood?
Yeah.
I did. I lived in the UP, grew up here, was able to be outside and play with my brothers and run through the woods and have fun.
How many brothers do you have?
I have 4.
And how many sisters do you
2.
have? Aww.
My brothers were really hard to live with.
Are they nice?
Sometimes. They're pretty good. Sometimes they pick on me because I was easy to pick on, I suppose.
Were you the youngest?
Yeah.
See, my grandma didn't have a sister or a brother.
No?
She only had brothers. Yeah, her sisters were older than her and dad before they even got grown up.
Do you have any sisters or brothers?
No.
Do you have any animals?
Yeah, one the year before last year, I had a cat. My daddy was older than me.
Older than you?
It was like a pretty old cat.
Yeah. Cats can get pretty old.
Siam.
Oh, that's a pretty name.
You know, that's what kind.
Oh, I thought that was the name.
Harry was it.
Oh.
Well, this is our new cat. She's 1 year old. She's turned to 1 year old cats shouldn't have babies. 2, it's good.
It's fine when they're 2?
We have a lot more coming in.
Oh.
I can take, we got just one more chair. I can get a couple more chairs in the back if you want. It's up to you guys.
So we have 3, 6, 7.
I can get a couple more chairs.
I'll stand, so.
One more chair for now. 2. Oh, we'll bring 2 more in.
It's on the floor behind you here.
And there's another one in the
Trying to
back.
scoot this
Yeah,
one
scoot that
over
one
and-
up.
You might have to shift, bounce everybody on a chair. Is that good? You want one more? You can leave the door open, and we'll be quiet on this end, but
We might want to, it's gonna get really.
it'll get hot in
Okay,
there,
yeah.
you know? I can get one more.
Yep, let's do one more.
How long is this been in? Yeah, I'm hoping that this permit does not go in.
Until you're ready for it.
Okay.
Sir, are you coming in for this meeting? You can take a seat. There's an open chair here. Right on.
It's like we got our microphone is still working, so let's just connect yourselves. We're just preparing.
Where are the two tongues? Are those two tongues coming?
Working in your space.
Does this go up high? Maybe I will see. Can you hold that? You want me to do a little something?
No.
No?
Sorry.
Oh, that doesn't go any higher. It's the highest.
Here you go.
Even higher?
What's he doing up there? We gotta show everybody. See? And we have thousands and thousands and thousands of people back at home that are depending on us. I don't know. They have it muted. They don't want us to hear them.
You guys didn't come in before we started, or you can come in after? Before. I'm assuming we're
Other.
Starting okay.
I think we're on mute as of now. I'm assuming they'll let us know when we want to start.
Yeah.
Need a chair?
Can you go all the way down on the far side, just so that, we have,
And I can move to,
well, just in case somebody else comes in.
yeah, they're in the testimony.
Yeah.
Well, is the little girl gonna testify?
Yep.
Is she?
Absolutely.
Okay, she'll need to be in the camera angle then too. If you'll see yourself on the bottom right for the picture-in-a-picture, what you see there is what they see.
Do you want us to shift down? Do you want us to hear? Oh, yeah, that's great.
Okay, we've got,
Horsey
there's a
right
chair
there.
down that way as well.
Horsey might be better, Kathleen, you might be better there, or over there. Chauncey, Forrest. Are we walking in the picture?
There you go.
Seats, are we all set at the moment?
Yeah.
Right on, fantastic.
If you need it.
Thank you much, sir.
We had a couple more people coming, hopefully this will be good. Is that just ambient noise?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Where is it? Sorry. Can I just have one second?
Yeah, you don't have any of these.
I don't have any.
We're on mute right now. Yeah, I'll turn it on when we. Yeah.
So that's the microphone there?
The lower area is what they see, Chauncey, so when you speak it, push hard down, push left. They can see. Yeah.
We can switch to.
Senate Committee on Natural Resources will come to order. The clerk will please call the roll.
Chair Casperson.
Here.
Senator Pavlov.
Here.
Senator Robertson.
Here.
Senator Stamas. Here. Senator Warren. Here. Mr. Chairman, you have 5 members present. There is a quorum.
Thank you, and just a notification, if you didn't hear, we did remove House Bill 4438. We're still working on that, hope to bring that up probably next week. So with that, would you all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the committee minutes from February 21st, 2018. Senator Pavlov, without objection, minutes are adopted. Today, we're taking testimony only. There will be no voting on Senate Bills 839, 840, and 881. We'll start out with testimony on Senate Bills 839 and 840. They're both connected, so I think we'll put them together through the testimony, so we're not doing it individually. And with that, we have folks up in the Marquette area, video conferencing in, and if we could, Matt, are you there, Matt Johnson? Can you hear us?
Yeah, Chairman Casperson, good afternoon. Can you hear us okay?
We can hear you okay. Matt, if you want to get us started, that would be great. And I apologize in that we don't have a good connection between you and us as far as organizations, so make sure you identify yourself if you wish to speak, so the clerk can document everything. So with that, Matt, maybe you could get us started on these two bills and explain them for us?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chair, to discuss Senate Bills 839 and 840. I guess I'd like to kind of set the table of why we're proposing this legislation. And we have several people here in the room today at Northern Michigan University who I believe also have something to say about the proposed legislation as well. First, I just would like to do an introduction to Eagle Mine and Part 632. If those who aren't familiar, Part 632 passed back in 2004 unanimously by the House and the Senate. I'm assuming that unanimous votes in the House and the Senate don't come around very often. And Eagle Mine was the first mining company in the state of Michigan to apply for permits under Part 632. Those permits were granted a few years later. We started construction in 2010, and we started our mining operations in 2014. In Part 632, it is hailed as some of the strictest mining regulations in the country. Other companies, other regulators from other states actually come to Michigan to learn about the process of how we develop Part 632 and try to model their mining regulations after Michigan's. And also, Eagle Mine has performed well under Part 632. We are considered a modern mine, an example of modern mining in the United States, and we receive a lot of attention over the success of our operations as well. Over the last 3 years since we've been in operations, we've been able to understand how Part 632 and what I'll talk about in a minute, Part 301, affects our operations. You know, what works well in Part 632, what doesn't work well in Part 632. And we talked about this for a couple of years, and last fall we decided, well, instead of talking about it, why don't we talk to the DEQ and say, hey, you know, how could we make Part 632 better? We started those conversations last fall, and we've gone through several iterations of language to offer some flexibility to the regulators and to Eagle Mine, which is stated in the proposed legislation. And I'll give you an example. Any change we do on the mining site requires a written notification to the DEQ. So we're constantly writing and notifying the DEQ of those changes. The DEQ can decide if those changes require an amendment to our mining permit, and they can decide whether it's a minor amendment or a significant amendment. At times, we might have an opportunity for a change that doesn't impact the environment. It could be a change for efficiency. It could be a change for safety of our operations. Yet we still potentially would have to go through a permitting process for a change that doesn't impact the water, doesn't impact the environment. We would like some flexibility in being able to make those changes without going through potentially a full permitting process. But even so, even the way that the draft language is written, the DEQ could at any time say, no, you do need to go through the full permitting process. Even if the amendment is significant, the DEQ could decide, if they wish, to go through a shortened process. These decisions would not rule out or eliminate public input. It would not eliminate a public meeting, for example. That process would still move on. So in some sense, the process could be shortened from a 6-month review process maybe to a 3-month review process. But the flexibility is there for the DEQ. This was also the original intent of Part 632, and we drafted the statute back in 2003 to give the DEQ that flexibility. But through the process of rulemaking, the rules at times conflict with the actual statute. Words such as may or shall, for example. So we wanted to clarify the original intent of the statute, by offering this flexibility to the regulators. That is Part 632. 301 is pretty interesting. So Eagle Mine, we process nickel and copper. We're an underground mine. We haul our ore from the mine to the mill. Every mining operation needs a tailings facility. Tails are the rock that's left over after you extract the metal. So after we extract nickel and copper, we need a place to put tails. We purchased the Humboldt Mill, a closed mining operation. It was an open pit iron mine. That open pit, over the years, filled with water. Subaqueous deposition of tails is actually considered an environmental best practice. So we take our tails and we place those tails in the bottom of the old open pit mine that's now filled with water. If you look at how we're regulated, so Part 632 regulates the tailings facility, the Humboldt pit, as a waste treatment facility. However, the Inland Lakes and Streams Act, Part 301, says that any water impoundment that's over 5 acres in size is essentially considered a lake. There are exemptions in 301 to waste treatment facilities, which the Humboldt is a waste treatment facility. We do treat the water before it is released back into the environment. However, the way the exemptions are written in 301, it does not cover the Humboldt pit the way it was designed and ordered to be constructed. So we wanted to clarify 301 to include the fact that the Humboldt pit is not a lake. It is not a water of the U.S. according to the EPA. It is not a water of the state according to the DEQ. And it should not be classified as a lake because it is a waste treatment facility. And this is not that much different than other waste treatment facilities are treated under 301 in the state of Michigan. So why is this important to us? It's important because we have dual regulations. So the pit's regulated by 2 different laws, and at times those laws conflict with one another. And we wanted to offer that clarification to say, okay, are we regulated under Part 632 as a waste treatment facility, not a lake? The reason why this becomes problematic for our operations is any work that we're doing in the tailings facility has to include regulations of a lake, such as the high water mark. So a real life example that we came up with, which is why we're proposing this now, was last summer we wanted to change the way we were depositing the tails in the bottom of the lake, move our tailings pipes that are now floated on the lake and then are on the pit, and then we sink those tailings lines down to deposit tails. It'd be better for us and easier for us, and we would be able to deposit tails more precisely if we could bolt those tailings facilities along the pit wall. It's a pretty steep pit wall because it was an old open pit mine. But because we have to follow regulations for the ordinary high water mark of a lake, we are not allowed to do that unless we apply for a new permit under 301. Applying for a new permit, we would need to plan a year in advance to do this. So we actually needed to create a workaround to deposit tails differently because simply there's not enough time for operational effectiveness to go through a permitting process under 301, especially if this activity is already permitted and allowed under Part 632. So this is how it creates operational efficiencies for us. It also is a safety issue as well. In order to move our tailings pipes around on the pit now, it requires us to get in a boat it's a day of work every time that we do it. It would be easier, more efficient, and safer to actually bolt those tailings lines in the side of the pit. So this is why we're presenting that. This also could impact us at closure. Part 632 expects us to follow certain environmental parameters during closure. And to change some of those water treatment plans or water treatment operations could require us to go through a 301 permitting process for closure if it's continued to be regulated by 301 and 632. So it's just another example of how the two laws conflict with one another and why we're looking for clarification in 301. So at the end of the day, what this provides is it really cleans up the process, which is it simplifies and clarifies some of the legislation as it's written today, the law as it's written today, makes it more understandable, and makes it easier to understand and operate for us, and creates flexibility for regulators and how they regulate Eagle Mine. And I would just like to say that, you know, I'm here representing 450 employees at Eagle Mine and their families in creating the best opportunity we can to run an efficient, safe mining operation that's protective of the environment. None of our proposed changes change our environmental performance parameters. They do not change any tax liabilities we have with the local community or the state of Michigan. So I wanted to clarify that because I know there's some concerns. I know it's kind of a lot to handle all at once, but be glad to answer any questions that I could.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Matt. I've got cards up here, but with the people that are up there, I don't know everybody that's there, so if it would be okay, if there's some people up there that would like to testify, if you could identify yourself, and maybe I could take one of you testify right now, and then I'll go to my cards here, and we could go back and forth and try to get through everybody, if that'd be okay. So I guess I'd offer it up. If there's somebody up there that would like to say something, if you could just identify yourself for the record so we can get that in the records.
My name's Kathleen Heidemann. I'm going to be testifying on behalf of the Upper Peninsula Environmental Coalition. I'm a board member of the Upper Peninsula Environmental Coalition and past president of Save the Wild UP. And I'm testifying on behalf of our thousands of supporters and your constituents. Senator Casperson, as you know, the Upper Peninsula is the ground zero for sulfide mining in the state of Michigan. This is not an issue that affects downstate districts at this time. So this is an issue that's near and dear to our hearts and the hearts of your residents and constituents. So in terms of both of these bills, Senate Bill 839 and Senate Bill 840, you're correct in saying that they are tied together. I see the ties also in terms of how they create potential loopholes. You don't want to make the legislation worse in the amendment process. And so I'd like to share some of our concerns from an environmental protections perspective. First of all, these bills are designed to modify the existing regulations in order to more directly benefit the mining industry, specifically Eagle Mine, but potentially other mining companies as well, proposing sulfide mining in Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So Part 632, the first proposed amendment, is the law governing sulfide mining in Michigan, and as Matt said, that's dating back to 2004 when it was enacted with unanimous support, not just by the legislature, but it was also unanimously supported by the stakeholders who worked in a really great bipartisan and cross-table effort to come together to craft this protective legislation. I wasn't a part of it, but I still hear people talking about how unusual it is to have industry and environmental stakeholders come to the table together and agree on legislation to protect the environment. Specifically, this environmental regulation was set up because sulfide mining is seen as very different from existing types of mining that we have in the U.S., in the state of Michigan experience with. So I'd like to remind you of some of the ways that this is designed to protect the environment. The Senate Bill 839 flies in the face of the original legislative intent for Part 632. So it was designed to protect the environment because this is an unusual kind of mining. So the legislative findings say that it is the policy of the state to foster the conservation and development of the state's resources, but there has to be a balance in that. That non-ferrous metallic sulfide deposits are different from iron oxide ore deposits currently being mined in Michigan, and that sulfide minerals react when exposed to air and water to form acid mine drainage. Because of that, there are the risks of significant damage to the environment, impacting human health, and degrading the quality of life of the impacted community. That impacted community is right here. So in addition to the concerns of Eagle Mine, you have to balance your proposal with the concerns of the community. And that was the intent of Part 632. It is not designed to streamline operations to get permits issued as fast as possible. It's designed to protect the environment and the community. So reminding you of that, also the special concerns surrounding non-ferrous metallic mining that warrant additional regulatory measures. It shall occur, the benefits of sulfide mining shall occur only when the conditions assure that environment, natural resources, and public health and welfare are adequately protected. So unfortunately, this bill would remove critical protections from Part 632, and it's just not warranted. The environmental protection that is facilitated here is done through strict permitting. And that's the process that Eagle Mine is talking about. The strict permitting requires public participation in the amendment process. When a mining company proposes to mine a sulfide ore body, you want to have a public that is able to engage along the process of the future of that mining project. If you don't, you end up with mining districts that morph incrementally without adequate public participation in the process. Also, these permits, the permits are environmental protection permits, not strictly economic permits. So when you're looking at the intent of the law, it's to safeguard public participation and avoid the adverse effects to the environment. Industry cannot regulate itself. When it comes to sulfide mining and all forms of mining, America tried that already, Michigan tried that already. The results were terrible. We're not going to repeat that. It ended badly for our air, for our water, and we cannot afford to repeat the mistakes of the past. As proposed, 839 is essentially creating a tool for bypassing public participation in the permitting process. Not in the original permitting process, but in the amendments that inevitably happen as a mining project is successful. And to the degree that we want mining projects to be successful, we still have to make sure that the public is able to provide input. These are decisions that impact the water and environmental resources of their community. These are impacts to your constituents, and they're impacts that even if they're not obvious in the permit amendment process, they may have unintended consequences. So the permit amendment process allows stakeholders to come together and inform the DEQ and the decision-making process. Frequently, that involves citizens who live next to a proposed project sharing their personal expertise, their on-the-ground knowledge of an area and how this may impact a situation. Sometimes the DEQ is not aware of exactly how this may impact an adjacent landowner, for example. You also have examples of environmental groups that are reaching out to third-party experts and hiring with our own money examples as recent as the Aquila project, looking for technical expertise, third-party expertise that helps inform and make the decision process more environmentally protective. And I'd add that that is a 14th Amendment right. Our right to due process in this participation is guaranteed by the 14th Amendment. So when you change whether or not the public is able to have public notice of an amendment, when you change the public participation or the public commenting process, that may make the operation better for Eagle Mine, but it makes it worse for your constituents. That's a constitutional issue. It really, SB 839 is a solution in search of a problem. There is no real problem here. Mining companies report regularly that the strict regulations that are enacted in Michigan and elsewhere in the United States are actually very good for mining. They know what to expect. They know how to negotiate these. The problems come up when there are regulations that they don't know the variables in, regulations in other countries that are not as strict or clear. These companies know how to navigate the process very clearly, and they're doing so very successfully. The public needs to be protected in this. According to the Fraser Institute, the survey of mining CEOs across North America, they see the mining regulations in Michigan as a good thing. They report success. They call it a low-risk jurisdiction that is mining friendly to permitting. That's what Eagle Mine says. That's what Lundin says. So they're not having problems with Part 632 at this point. So in terms of the regulations, the regulators are not making decisions willy-nilly. They're not imposing decisions in the permitting process that are unfriendly to the mining companies. They're taking the concerns of citizens and trying to balance it against the project that the company wants to change or modify. A lot of times those unintended impacts are not present in the original mining permit. The original mining permit for Eagle, since Matt mentioned that one, did not contemplate going to an additional ore body that was, going to require miles of tunneling to reach underground. The original Eagle Mine use of the Humboldt tailings facility did not include the filling of the Humboldt pit with tailings. Filling up to, it'll be like 15 feet of water left at the top from hundreds of feet of depth. So those are unintended. That was not spelled out in the original permit process. And in the amendment process, the public absolutely must have the ability to comment on that. There are consequences to our air, natural resources, and our potential use of these natural resources for decades and centuries to come in Michigan. It's not a short-term question. I appreciate Eagle Mine wanting to get their permits as quickly as possible, but there's no regulatory hitch in the process. There's literally 1 month that the public gets when a public notice for a mining permit comes up. It doesn't matter if that mining permit is going to be 35 pages long as an amendment letter that Eagle Mine sends to the DEQ, or if it's going to be 30,000 pages of a technical comment. The public has very limited time to read this, understand how it may impact their community, and provide informed public comment to help regulators make decisions. I believe Part 632 is really not as bad as it sometimes is perceived to be, both by mining companies and by environmentalists. I think that it has yet to be fully enforced, and some of those areas where environmentalists would want revisions are actually making the environmental impact assessment process stronger, because once an amendment takes place, the environmental impact assessment becomes a sort of EIA light rather than a full environmental impact analysis that would look at how the new operations or the scope of operations or a new proposed technique will truly impact the environment on the ground for the people who live there. The Part 301 issue, you're right to say that they're tied together. It's incorrect to think that this is only limited to Humboldt Pit or Eagle Mine's operations. Part 301 is not designed to facilitate subaqueous tailing facilities. Just to be totally clear, Part 301 is a natural resources protection bill. Okay, so the legislation, the intent of Part 301 is protecting inland lakes and streams. Part 301 is designed to protect water quality. It's not that it's designed to create impediments to slow down a process for Eagle Mine when they want to move their tailing lines around. It's to protect the water quality in case birds want to land on that lake, right? in case that lake is failing to function as an environmentally healthy lake because of the activity. So I think Part 301 is not designed for Eagle Mine. It's not designed for the Humboldt Pit. It's not designed to enable tailings facilities. It's kind of a bastardization of the Part 301 intent to use it to fill lakes of any kind with tailings. In the case of Humboldt, there was no formal nomination process. It's simply that it was owned by a mining company, and so it was used as a large toilet for sulfide mine tailings. These are not rocks. These are sulfide mine tailings containing salts and heavy metals that have been ground to the consistency of talcum powder and then dumped through lines into the bottom of the lake, filling it hundreds of feet. Eventually, it will have to return to the ecosystem, and that's where Part 301 is concerned. This is a watershed. It doesn't matter to me or to birds or to the environment whether the glacier carved this lake or whether an iron mine company carved the lake. It is functioning before the mine company comes along as a lake, and it needs to function as a part of a watershed after the mining company is done using it. Anything that you do with this language for the filling of bottomlands in the Humboldt Pit could potentially be used to further another mining company's plans to place tailings, toxic salt-ridden tailings in another lake. Inland lakes and streams in Michigan have to be protected under this law, not open to additional contamination. And those are my major concerns. So thank you for your ear, and I really appreciate your opportunity to speak today. Any questions?
Thank you, Kathleen. Are there any questions? Seeing none, I'm going to change it up a little bit because I've been given a sheet here, and I apologize, Kathleen. Your name was here, so I apologize. I didn't see that. So thank you for speaking. I also have Horst Schmidt had called called in and said that I'm assuming would like to testify. So is Horst there?
Yes.
Go ahead, Horst.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. Let me quote, the Michigan Chamber of Commerce and the Michigan Farm Bureau represent thousands of businesses and their families across the state. By comparison, there's almost 10 million citizens in Michigan. Well, to go on, and to like many other citizens who inhabit our Pleasant Peninsula home, we believe in government transparency and accountability, especially when it comes to being stewards of our state's natural resources. This is what Richard Studley and Carl Bednarski, heads of those two organizations, wrote, and in the bridge on February 14th, 2018. It seems that we are all environmentalists now, and I think it's great that they are willing to put forth this type of effort. But the question is, are we looking at the same accountability and transparency? Are we looking at the same kind of stewardship? So when I saw the latest bills, 839 and 840, this other bill, 881, which we know nothing about, you know, UPEC, and I'm on the board and president of the organization, became alarmed over the further weakening of our environmental protections, because in the past year and a half, you have sponsored legislation, some of it successfully, to further, as Kathleen Heidemann pointed out, to remove the public from the process of giving input and having the ability to say, this is something that can hurt us, or this is something that can help us. But the point is, the public is being gradually pushed out in the legislation that you're putting forth. That's the substance of that part. I just wanted to bring up one thing. We have this issue of environmental impacts that was talked about by Ms. Heidelman, and there's a problem we have with the Office of Oil, Gas, and Mining, in that they are basically geologists, and so they don't really bring in a multidisciplinary team, and we really need that in order for them to look at the whole picture. Because every time we go in, we have this issue, we're saying it's significant, they say it's not significant. And so that there's this argument, and we ask them for a definition, and they won't give us a definition. So we need to know what is significant according to the law or to the rules, rather than just saying, basically by fiat, that it's not significant as far as they're concerned. They're going to just go ahead and roll over us. So I just want to make sure that you understand we don't oppose your legislation. It's the problem of the appearance of fairness that seems to be a problem with it. It looks like you're really helping, but it's all the details are the problems. We don't know what the composition of these groups, for example, in 652, 653, and 654 are going to be. So how do we know that we're going to get the kind of representation? You have half a dozen people who are in industry on this 652 legislation, and you have one environmental group, one land trust group. So why isn't it just two industrial organizations, so that things are balanced rather than skewed? So I just wanted to make you aware that this is a problem we have. This appearance of fairness is really important, and to have some substance behind it. Thank you.
Forrest, if I could for just a second, you cited some bill numbers. I just want a clarification, so I think we might be talking about something different. And so we've got 839 and 840 up, and you were mentioning some other bills. Did you mean 839 and 840, or were you talking about some other bills? Because I lost you when you were talking about these other bills. I didn't know what they were. I think you cited
He wanted to know if you're citing both those previous bills and the 830, 839, 840. Yeah, you're saying that they're connected.
Yeah, I mean, all the legislation seems to be almost like a cascade of changes that are going through your legislative process in the last year and a half.
Sure. Okay, thank you. I didn't want to cut you off. If you had something else to say, I apologize.
Do you have anything else to say?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. I've also got Lisa here, and Lisa was with the Mining Journal. I didn't know if you planned on testifying or just identifying that you were going to be there.
I'm just identifying that I was going to be there. I was just identifying that I'm going to be there.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Okay, with that, I'm going to shift gears and come back here. And we've got some cards with, I've got Sean Hammond with the Michigan Environmental Council, and Sean wishes to speak. And if it's okay, Sean, you've identified both the bills, so if you want to address them both, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Casperson. Many members of the address both bills.
Testimony, and I'll actually just make a note on 881. We're going to hold off. We're still evaluating what the changes are on that one, and would like to be given leeway if this comes up for another meeting to weigh in. So we are opposed to both bills at this time. We are still, however, I will note, continuously reviewing our understanding of what these bills do. On 839, I will note that we thank the chair for the inclusion on the significant language. I think the further definition of what is a significant change is going to be helpful in the long run for everybody to know what's going to trigger that higher process, and that's something we've asked for a while. So we think that the language is kind of starting down the right road. But the new section 7 in 839, we do have concerns about just on the definition. I think a mining area, and we're still trying to kind of wrap our heads around what exactly you could move around under this definition, and have some concerns about what the mining area definition would entail in that way. So it might just be a little bit of tightening the language to ensure that it is really just moving some non-essential buildings around or things like that, where it's not going to affect any neighbors or any risk of anything underground, long-term engineering stuff. These are, of course, very heavily engineered sites when they go through the permit process, as you know, and we just want to make sure that any risk to that engineering is addressed as we're moving things around. So it might just be a little bit of tightening of language in that piece. And then on 840, again, we understand that a wastewater pond is a wastewater pond, but the language is currently written. We do have some concerns about that it might open up a bigger loophole unintentionally. And we understand the intent is to serve as if it's been approved as a wastewater pond and cut off from all other water supplies, that you can do what you need to work within it. And we understand that intent and don't want to put too many hamperings on something that is truly disconnected from the rest of the waters of the state. However, the language that, as it reads now, was approved under this part or under a state or federal law and under this part. This part Part 301 and our pollution control laws have changed over the years many times, as you know. So it could be a historical site that was at one point approved under state and federal law and maybe even under this law or a previous iteration of this law that could be brought back to life, so to speak, in a way that might not be environmentally sound. So actually I've had some discussion with the DEQ on maybe a couple language tweaks there to just really narrow it down on this. If it's truly a wastewater plant disconnected from the rest of the waters of the state, we understand the intent behind that. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sean. Sean, one of the issues that's been brought up by Eagle was the idea that they see a conflict between 301 and 632 to a degree. Have you looked at that? If there is, what would you suggest is the appropriate way to try and kind of massage it and get it right?
Yeah, and that's what I think. It's really just narrowing it to a currently approved wastewater treatment facility that is, really cut off from the rest of the waters of the state. If you go through 301 once and get approved as a wastewater treatment plant, you're going to be cut off from the rest of the water supply. And also the in and upland piece, just a blanket removal of that is concerning to us as well, because of potentially historical sites or anything that might have been approved that could maybe get wrapped in here. So just a tightening of the language to make sure it's something that was currently approved for this and not something that historically was. So we understand the intent, and if there is a conflict between those two, we understand. But this is 301 governs sewage treatment, any basically impounded water potentially. So we just want to make sure that it is very narrowly tailored to these wastewater treatment ponds that are cut off from the rest of the waters of the state.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? See none. Thank you, Sean. Thank you. Okay, I've got some cards I'm going to read in. I got Sarah Howes and Hal Fitch with the DEQ. They do not wish to speak, but support. I've got Nick Acapinti. Nick, I just wanted to make the last word as close as I could get it. Michigan League of Conservation Voters does not wish to speak and opposes. Shows 839. Does that include 840? No. Okay. And then you also turn in a card for 881, which we'll get to. So thank you. And then I've got Troy Cummings with Aquila Resources. Does not wish to speak. Supports 839, 840. Mike Berkowitz with the Sierra Club does not wish to speak and opposes 839 and 840. And that's all the cards we have for that. So as I said, there will be no voting today on those bills, so we'll have further discussion on them. Appreciate everybody testifying. But before I do move on, if I could go back to Marquette real quick. That's all the names that I had. We've got a little bit of time. I'm running short because I got to get to 881, but I didn't want to cut anybody off. If somebody had something they could share with us briefly, if there's somebody else there, you just identify yourself.
Chairman Casperson, we're well acquainted with one another. This is Chauncey Moran. I was on the committee to establish the rules and regulations for Part 632. And the intent of the rules and regulations was actually formulated by about half and half of environmentalist established groups and mining and industry concern. And I believe that in the event of establishing that, the greatest protection that we wanted to allow was achieved with the exception of one particular thing that came up in the very last day that we haggled over, and that is a water quality standard, and which is still kind of a gray area. The water quality standard that was suggested and was agreed upon was halfway between drinking water standard and the background water standard, but we seem to have a moving target with the testing that's being done with the test wells that are down gradient from the disposition at the Eagle Project out there on the AAA Road. And these proposals of 839 and 840, one of the things that is kind of alarming to me is to be able to relocate or to do anything on the property, which actually has been leased by the state of Michigan through the Michigan DNR, Natural Resources, not the DEQ, and they are the ones who actually have formulated and have set aside the standard for the leasing process of how things are done on the property. And to write this in here to say that that's something that the DEQ has a formulation about is quite incorrect in the rule of law, and I think you understand that yourself, being a very strong proponent of the protection for the natural resources of this state. And I think that's my biggest objection. And when you start talking about the conflict between 301 and Part 632, I would remind everyone who is involved in this process that things were written into those regulations as a redundancy and a double protection. In the part about the lake, or whether it's not a lake, that's part of a watershed of the west branch, in this case the middle branch of the Escanaba River estuary, which feeds a lot of things and actually enters into the Lake Michigan, whereas on the Eagle Project that enters into a Lake Superior. So you actually have a double process going on here where total impact can happen in two of our Great Lakes and iconic watersheds of the world. And one thing I would like to say is that, and going back to some of the comments that were made by Matt and Kathleen about specifics of information that is gathered along the way, is I happen to be not only a proponent but the object of an individual who was walking the land for many years and identified the numbers of springs and the impact of the watersheds that were around these areas. And I passed that information to everybody who was concerned with the project, including the Eagle Project and DEQ, DNR, and NRC, and the Natural Resources Commission, as well as and yourself. As a matter of fact, we had numerous conversations about these water resources. And I believe that the legislator's responsibility is to protect the resources of the state. And I think that you've all have taken that oath that you're doing that. And in many cases, I think you're doing a drop-dead job. But to adopt these particular things that are governed here in these two proposals that we brought forward today, in 39 and 40, 839 and 840, I think it's accommodating inconsistencies with what's going on with the protection of the waters of the state of Michigan to accommodate something that's easily done. I know from moving pipes around from boats that the original idea of doing that was so you had equal distribution of the tailings within the lake itself. That's what that was for. So if you go to the land side and it's all on the wall, as Matt is suggesting, then you have a buildup and a concentration of an area that was not intended to happen. That's why that was out there to float around there and to move that pipe. That's what was discussed in the beginning, and that's what was suggested, and everybody agreed on it, but now it's becoming too hard because somebody complained they don't like to do that. I don't think we do business that way. There's a lot of jobs in any business criteria where people don't like to do it, but it's necessary for the fulfillment of the operation and the criteria of leaving a legacy for safe and protection of the natural resources of the state. And thank you very much for allowing me to speak today.
Thanks, Chauncey. I do want to identify up north as well that if anyone up there has written testimony, that if they want to, they can upload it to the committee website, and then they can send it to me or your office, and I will scan it in. So, did you get all that? I don't know if you have written testimony, feel free to go to the committee website and send it, and we'll scan it in and make sure we have it for your testimony.
Chairman Casperson, we have another individual who's traveled quite a long way to testify here from the Western UP, and I believe it would be in good graces to allow her to testify.
Okay, if we could, as quick as possible, I've got to get to the other bill, but please go ahead and identify yourself for the record.
That's a sensitive mic, he'll hear you.
Hello, Senator Casperson and Natural Resource Committee. My name is Regina Chaltry, and I'm here from Menominee, Michigan, in the southern UP. I'm the administrator of a group of over 6,000 people called the Save the Menominee River. And can you hear me? Can you acknowledge that you can hear me?
We can hear you. You're coming in good.
All right. I'm here to register my opposition to the both 839 and 840. There are a lot of reasons for concern when cutting out regulation and streamlining for the sake of business. And I think it, in the future, will impact our community, who is very concerned about the impact of the proposed Back 40 project, which on the day that they submitted their wetlands application, completely changed the layout of their mining facilities. And when I contacted the DEQ about it, they said, don't worry, they're going to have to apply for amendments. And now, by changing whether or not they have to even apply for an amendment, I think that that's really concerning. There have been a lot of people that are really expressing their opposition as well, and so that's why I drove all this way. And so I wanted to, just in the briefest way possible, say that I think that this is more than just an Eagle Mine issue, and I appreciate the way that the DEQ has to look over projects before anything can be done. I think that that's good business practice. I think it is protecting the citizens and the voters and the taxpayers of Michigan. And as was said before, you know, we hold 90% of North America's fresh water. 90% of the fresh water is at risk if we streamline things for the sake of business and to save a mining company, you know, a few dollars for a day's work. So I thank you for hearing me today, and to all the members of the committee who hear me now, please don't pass this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. I'll find out and we'll try to get it clarified, but you brought up a point that I don't think applies here, but just in case, I'm going to verify it. You mentioned if they wanted to reapply for a different wetlands portion or permit, that somehow these two bills would impact that and they wouldn't have to. I don't think that's the case, but I don't know that for sure, Regina, so I'll verify for you, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Are we good up?
I also wish to speak, but I will wait until after you read the next bill. I want to speak about all three. So out of fairness, I want to hear what you have to say about this other one too.
Okay, with that, we're going to move on to Senate Bill 881, and I've got Sylvian Collard and Scott Steiner who wish to speak in support to Senate Bill 881.
Mr. Chairman and member of the Natural Resources Committee, thank you for your time today and the opportunity to talk about the Bill 881. So my name is Sylvain Collard, General Manager of the Copperwood Project, and I'm here today to talk about first the company, and after that with Mr. Scott, we're going to talk about the Bill 881. So first on page 2, who is Highland Copper? What we have right now in the pipeline is we want to start with the Copperwood Project, which is the first step of a long process of projects. After that, we have the White Pine project, and finally, we have the exploration team, which is called UPX in the area of Marquette. Excuse me. In the team, we have a strong management and technical team, and we have a new CEO, which is Denis Méville-Deschênes, who has more than 30 years of experience in the mining industry. Also, for the capital markets, we have some strong shareholders, which is Greenstone Resources, Cisco Gold Royalties, and Orion Mine Finance. So if you go to page 3, you can see the map of where we are exactly. So on the left, you can see the Copperwood project, which is not very far from Wakefield. 30 miles on the east part, you have the other one, which is the White Pine North project. And completely on the right of the map, you have the UPX property, which is over 447,000 acres of land. And there is some very good potential for new deposit and mine in this area. So if we go to page 4, you can see right there, this is the vision for the 5 years plan. So in 2018, we have the vision to start the Copperwood project for the construction. And at the same time, we're going to start the desktop study for the White Pine. 2019, we want to start the exploration in the UPX in the area market. 2020, we're going to complete the White Pine feasibility study, and 2021, the Copperwood project will be in operation. So as soon as we have some cash flow from that project, we're going to start the White Pine construction in 2022, and I hope the operation will be in place with White Pine in 2025. So on page 5, this is the estimated investment forecast and how much money we did invest up to now. So since 2012, we invest over 75 million in the area for exploration and salaries. After that, we have, with the Copperwood project, we want to invest over 300 million for the capital initial, and that's going to create in the area 400 jobs for the construction, and the construction will be for 2 years, and after that, in 2021, the operation will create over 400 jobs. And as you know, as soon as we create a mining job, you can multiply that by 5 or 6, it's creating a lot of connects job, and it's going to be everywhere in Michigan. Michigan sovereign tax will be 50 million, and with the life of mine, with just the Copperwood projects, we're going to invest 1.2 billion in the area, wages, contractor, consultants, suppliers, and services. So page 7, as you can see, it's a more detailed map of where is the Copperwood project. As I said before, the Copperwood is something like 15 miles away from Wakefield, and it's not very far from the old White Pine mine, which is 30 miles. So you can see all the details, the infrastructure around that project. Page 8, it's a more detailed map of all the infrastructures we want to build in the future. You have the box cut and the access of the mine underground, and you have the process plan, so everything is there in that small map. On page 9, what is the approach of the Copperwood project? So first, you can see at the top there is a new equipment called continuous miner. And this equipment is full electrical, and we want to go ahead with that new technology. It's just brand new on the market, and we want to go ahead with that because the efficiency and the future is what is with that equipment. And the idea behind that is to put all the connections and the internet on that machine to see in real time what is the data mining, to have some statistic, machine learning, and artificial intelligence on that equipment. So this is the future. It's going to help us to mine some lower grades in different mining projects. And finally, at the bottom of the page, talent development. You all know in the area of Ironwood and Wakefield, we're going to have to train some new workers to be part of these big projects. Page 10, rapidly, is just technical information for the deposit of Copperwood project. After that, on page 11, what you can see right there is the difference between the previous feasibility study from Orvana 2012 and what we have right now with Highland Copper. So you can see in red, that was the deposit at that time, and with the new feasibility study in 2017, we decided to drill the section 5, which had more than 46% of new resources for the project. So with that resources, it's possible to have a project. Page 12, it's showing you the project timeline. So the feasibility study started in Q1 in 2017, and you can see all the steps to complete the project, and the operation will be in place in Q1 2021. So it's a a process of 4 years. Soon as the Copperwood project is completed, the big next mine will be the White Pine. So I'm pretty sure everybody remember the big mine of White Pine for more than 50 years. So we have a project there up north from the old property of White Pine, and there is more than 1.7 billion pounds of copper there. So this is the next project. So in 2018, we're going to start a desktop study to understand how much capital we have to do. And soon as we have the Copperwood project in operation with that cash flow, we're going to reinvest the money in that project. This is a very good future for us. On page 15, it's again technical information about the deposit of White Pine, which is very important to understand is Copperwood, we have a life of mine of 12 years, but with White Pine, it's 4 times bigger. So it can go up to more than 30 years of operation with that mine, which is kind of interesting. Page 17, so this is our future, UPX. So we have some land, like I said before, in the area of Eagle Mine. You can see on the map, the red line is showing all the limitation of the property. So every time you can see a X, this is maybe a future deposit. So there is some gold, there is some copper, there is some zinc, there is some silver. So a lot of potential right there. And we have a specific team working right now, 15 geologists, trying to put in place a plan for 2019 to start to drill one of these targets. So very interesting stuff for the future. On page 18, this is the executive summary. What is the major milestone for the future? So first one, we got the grant A for the repair of road 519 to access the Copperwood project. So we had the approval this month. So this is a good news for us. Next one is to get energy on site. So we have some discussion right now with different suppliers to bring a pipeline from Wakefield to the site of Copperwood. So discussion is ongoing. Next step, permitting. The application will be sent by the end of the month, and we are targeting to have the approbation of these permits by Q3 2018. And after that, Copperwood project, White Pine project, and the last 2 lines in the table are first the legislative, Part 31, Water Resources Protection. This one is linked with the UPX Mineral Future projects, and this is very important to us to discuss at this point. So I will let Mr. Scott discuss the Bill 881. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon. And Highland Copper and its entities are kind of the new kid on the block here in the UP for mining. And we looked at Eagle's experience under Part 632 in the permitting process, and we're learning a lot as we go along. And we want to learn by that experience and try to anticipate issues as they arise. And we have been working with this Senate Bill 881 now for not nearly as long as the other 2 bills, 839 and 840, but we've been having discussions with DEQ staff over the last several weeks and exchanged drafts of the language back and forth. So we have been working with them, and we'll continue to do so, certainly. As Sylvain mentioned, Highland plans to develop these other base metal mines in the western UP, and they include not just copper, but nickel, silver, gold, zinc. So it's not just the base ones, but also other non-ferrous metals. And Section 3116 of Part 31 has a very important exemption from the Water Resource Protection Act for mining companies, but right now it only applies to copper and iron mining companies. So we are proposing with this revision, first of all, that exemption should extend to all non-ferrous mining operations as well. With the recognition of the value of the state's economy of these mineral reserves in the UP and the comprehensive nature of Part 632, we think this exemption should apply to all these other mining companies. And as Sylvain described, there's a long timeline for all of these projects to get them up and running. And investments are being made right now in the long-term future. Probably one of the biggest investments is land. There is the need to acquire property rights way in advance of actual construction. And this is especially true for tailing deposit facilities. So many years in advance, they have to tie up property rights to these areas where tailings disposal will take place. And there's a recognition that mined-out pits to become the tailing disposal facilities are both economically and environmentally the best route and constitute the best mining practices for disposal and treatment of tailings. And that's shown by Eagle's experience with using the Humboldt mine pit. That's a good example of use of these. And also, in terms of long-term use, these mined-out pits being used, they're typically located in brownfield areas, so there's already infrastructure in place. You don't have to go build new roads to get access to them, build new utility lines. Water supply is already there typically, so you're not going to use other natural areas that are to build all these new facilities. And because Part 632 has stringent requirements for reclamation and cleanup and that sort of thing, these areas will be restored and be able to be reused in the future without any concerns for safety for the community. So use of these pits, in addition to the benefit to the mining company economically, there's an environmental advantage to using them and will constitute best mining practices, we think, also going into the future. In tailings disposal facilities, tailings basins under the statute, they're not all the same either. I mean, some of them will be designed to be treatment facilities like they do with Humboldt Mine. Some of those will have outfalls to surface waters, waters of the state. Some won't. Part 632, enacted in 2004, was way before 3116 was adopted as part of Part 31. And it established the process for permitting mining operations, but only if they could prove, in order to get the permit, that they could demonstrate to the DEQ that they would not pollute or impair the natural resources of the state or the public trust in the natural resources. So it's a very high standard to meet under Part 632 already. And within Part 632, there are numerous provisions that apply specifically to tailings facilities in terms of protecting the natural resources, including the water resources. For instance, Section 63205 has requirements for the environmental impact assessment, the environmental protection plan, and these must address how tailings facilities are protective of the environment for the long run, including water resources. There's also specific provisions there to prevent and control leaching of deposits, tailing deposits, to groundwater and protect against runoff of deposits to surface water. There's financial assurance and monitoring requirements in place for those purposes as well. And the Part 632 permit is not effective until all other permits are obtained from the MDEQ, including a NIPDIS permit if there's discharges to waters of the state from the tailings facility. With our proposed revisions to Section 3116, we're trying to achieve two different things. First is simply to extend the protection of the exemption to all non-ferrous mining companies instead of just copper and iron. Secondly, we're trying to clarify the language of the exemption for tailing facilities and bring it more into alignment with Part 632 and actual mining practices. The first part of that is to extend some of the defined terms from Part 632 and bring them into 3116 because they deal with the same thing, and that's tailings disposal in waters. And taking the more comprehensive language and better defined terms from 632 and applying them in this section, we think makes a lot of sense. And also, we're trying to replace, there's a vague description in 3116 that pertains to the DEQ making a determination as to whether only a minimal amount of residue resulting from placement of tailings has escaped into public waters, with a more precise term actually used in Part 31, which requires a permit for any waste or waste effluent discharged into waters of the state. That's a much clearer and easier term to understand and apply in practice. So, and we think this goes back to the original intent of what 3116 was supposed to achieve, which is create an exemption for the mining companies when they are creating a tailings basin on property they own and control completely, which is defined as inland waters in that section, or if you will, non-public waters, not waters of the state, and only require a permit under Part 31 for discharge into what the provision calls public waters, waters of the state, and that's referred to specifically in that section. So we think the intent of the provision does not change. It just adds more clarity, and that gives the mining companies like Highland more direction moving forward. It gives the regulators more direction also in dealing with the mining companies. We think it's better for everybody. It helps so that companies like Highland can do more long-term planning with certainty, and we can go forward from there. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. I've got a card to read in. Nick Ocapenti, it's a struggle, Nick. Michigan League of Conservation Voters, does not wish to speak but opposes 881. With that, I have no more cards, so can Marquette still hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, there was somebody else that wanted to speak. I've got a few minutes here yet that I'll stay if they wanted to say something, Matt.
Did you speak about 881 already?
We did, yes.
Well, you had mentioned that you're representing 400 some families that make a living from the mining industry. Can you hear me okay?
It's really sensitive. You can hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Now, Tom Casperson, you and I talked on the phone yesterday. And I want to start off by saying that we're not here to fight any of these families that make a living from the mining industry, okay? We're not here to fight them. So please, please don't pit us together or pit us against each other. That's not what this is about, okay? The fact is, Regina, Gracey, and myself, we came here to represent the thousands of people in our community, and our neighboring communities downstream, who are extremely opposed to the Back 40 project. And I'm not here to kill the Eagle Mine. That's not what this is about. But I will say this. You had mentioned yesterday about if you were going to have a garage built on your property, in your backyard, there's a permitting process that needs to happen with that.
If I could stop you just for 1 second, could you please identify your full name so we can put it in the record? The clerk would like to write it in, and then go ahead.
Right on. Sorry about that. Anthony J. Corey.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, I want to point out, I feel the need to point out that a mining industry, that is an industrial. That's industrial. You building a... Excuse me. Are you listening to me, Tom Casperson? I don't think you're listening. Okay. Okay. The garage that you want to build on your property, in your backyard, that is a residential area. For a mining company, that is an industrial area, plot of land. And it's important that there's a different standard, a higher standard required from mining companies, more so than a residential area. There are thousands of people opposed to this kind of mining. Now, again, I'm not here to kill the Eagle Mine. That's not what this is about. But the Back 40 project is a project. And so long as we are here, we are humans here, our existence needs to be respected. We will not let this become a mine. We will never let it become a mine. You need to respect our existence. That's very important. I'm extremely opposed to all three of these because any loosening of the permitting process with the mining industry, you're jeopardizing our water supply, jeopardizing our way of life, fishing, hunting, everything. Everything's on the line with this. If you allow this to happen, I would never, ever put you on the chopping block. I would never wish ill will for your individual person, your physical person. I would never wish ill will for you or your family. Why should it be any different for myself and my family, Regina and Gracey, their family, for our entire community? Why are you putting mining families before our families? That's what it seems like. That's how I'm perceiving it. It's how a lot of us perceive it. And you guys kind of tend to lump us together. But you know what? I'm here as your constituent, representing thousands of constituents, your constituents. So I ask, please reject these bills, all three of them. 839, 840, and 881. Gone. These bills need to die. We need to respect life. All life. Your life. The lives of the families that make a living from mining. Our families that make a living from tourism, from fishing, hunting. All of these things. Respect is mutual, and if you do not respect us, I don't know what to tell you, because there's thousands of people that are going to be watching this. Be mindful of that, Senator Casperson. Now, I didn't get a chance to talk to any of the other senators, the other four. I have a simple life. I'm a very busy man. I shovel the snow, feed our animals. I don't have a whole lot of time to do this. This is extremely out of my way to take part in this meeting. I'm a common person. Please don't neglect our existence. Please. Thank you.
Thank you, Troy. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. And I believe that's all we have for testimony. I see a hand up. I'm almost out of time here, Kathleen.
Hi, my name is Kathleen, and I registered to speak on these bills. Unfortunately, 881 was not available until today, and it was a very poor connection when Copperwood was just speaking about the Copperwood project. Highland Copper seems to have some very specific intentions regarding 881, which are still sort of becoming clear. I would just like to remind everyone what's at stake when you're talking about tailings, specifically with the Copperwood project and their potential reuse of the White Pine tailings facility. You have to picture Lake Superior starting in the 1970s. Photos taken of Lake Superior show that the tailings from the White Pine Basin, the tailing basins, were actually flushed out into Lake Superior in enormous quantities. They're still visible to some extent from aerial photographs. It's not a minor question to talk about what the residual amount of minerals are that could be flushed out and leave a mine waste treatment area or a tailings basin. This is a very important environmental concern. We have not had examples of polymetallic mines in that area, and so the loosening of the section 3116 to create an exemption for specifically the treatment tailings from polymetallic ore bodies at the White Pine tailings facility, for example, which I know that they're talking about reusing. The Mineral River operated as a sewer pipe directly connecting the tailing basins at the White Pine with Lake Superior. It was a very short flush out into the lake. And when you're opening up the language protecting Part 31 water quality standards, that's what we're talking about. Copper and iron were already in there. The mining regulations regarding copper and mining are different than the polymetallic ore bodies. But they're talking about areas elsewhere in Lake Superior, Western Mining District in Upper Michigan. They're also talking about potentially synergizing the use of existing facilities, right, reusing tailing basins, and trying to bring tailings or material to a centralized location for milling. So that would have the example, in that case of white pine, of magnifying potential environmental impacts for the white pine community, bringing in ore material from other ore bodies and processing it at one central location solves a problem for the mining company, but it opens up a water quality concern. And that's a serious water quality concern. I heard him talk about how he thinks that affecting the language to make it more broad, to cover the minerals in more a generic term. Any critical mineral, any metal could be defined as a mineral. That's really opening up Part 31 in a way that I find very dangerous. And I don't think that we've had enough information about this. So I asked the committee to review that very carefully. These are not small water quality concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen, and just a reminder, again, we're not voting today, so if you could look it over, we'd appreciate any comments you might have on it as we move forward with it, Kathleen, so appreciate your testimony today.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, with no further business before the Senate Committee on Natural Resources, we are adjourned.
Now let's see your video.
First time I've ever done this, actually.
The telephone lines seem to be partially down.
It's the internet speed.
Yeah.
Internet speed's a big thing.
Yeah. Especially with the last section, it was really hard.
You had no choice.
No.
We can understand the other person.
It was
Especially when there's an accent.
Okay, now it's time to upload.